Meanwhile, government leaders in Dallas asking dozens of healthcare workers there to just stay home. Those workers helped care for Thomas Duncan, the man who died of Ebola last week at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital. The Dallas County Commission wants all 75 workers to sign a contract agreeing to stay home in isolation. The commissioners considered a disaster declaration but decided against it.
President Obama set to name an Ebola Czar. We learned that earlier today amid growing alarm about that deadly virus here in the United States. The person he has announced is right here. This is Ron Klain. He's a former vice presidential chief of staff who has vast experience in the federal government. His job will now be to spearhead the nation's fight against Ebola. So the question is, can he make a difference? Let's ask Tammy Bruce. She's a radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor, and Marianne Marsh. She's a former senior advisor to Senator John Kerry. Marianne, let me start with you. Do you know Ron Klain? What can you tell us about him?
Ron Klain's a longtime Democratic operative. He certainly served behind the scenes for many Democratic presidential candidates, usually the guy who prepares the Democratic nominee for the presidential debates. He certainly knows his way around the federal government. He knows how to get things done, and he's certainly a very savvy communicator. So I have no doubt he'll get the job done and make sure there's a good message out there about how he's getting it done.
But Tammy, he's not a medical expert. He's a political hack, so to speak. Does it make sense to put someone like that in this role?
Well, look, I mean, there's two different ways to look at this. I mean, you've got a fellow who is going to have to coordinate, I guess, things beyond the medical response as well. But, you know, this was done in part in a way to placate concerns. I think this is more of a PR move. We already have, and this is, I think, the problem with the Ebola response, is that the failure of the administrative state, of so many people being involved. Adding someone else onto the layers, I'm not quite sure if that's the answer. But then he chooses, this is an opportunity, I think, for the president to send a message about seriousness. Someone who has actually experience within a crisis dynamic, like, frankly, a Rudolph Giuliani as an example, a man who in an incredible serious situation after September 11th was able to convey to the people information without creating concern.
Boy,
I'm not quite sure this
would have been a terrific idea, and then shown some bipartisan work on this front. Marianne, 1 second to you about the politicization of the CDC. We've seen that. We hear about Frieden talking about not wanting to harm these growing democracies on the African continent. I wonder if putting Klain in just kind of further politicizes what's happening here in the United States with Ebola. What do you think of that?
You know, Heather, here's the real politics here. We don't have a Surgeon General today when we could use him because of politics. You can't get the guy who's been nominated by the President of the United States as Surgeon General, confirmed by the United States Senate, because of politics.
Well, maybe this will actually move that along.
Guns. And that, well, wouldn't that be nice? But that has not been the case, and then it would be too little too late. Yep. So we're constantly appointing czars to things, and that tells you have a government that isn't equipped to deal with the problems we confront. You know, and it's always after the fact. And that's but that's the real politics here. We don't have a Surgeon General over one issue, a public health issue.
We do. Let me just mention here. We do have an acting Surgeon General right now. We haven't heard from him thus far.
The office is filled.
He's a very accomplished man, having served in the U.S. military and lots of different capacities. It would be nice to hear from somebody other than just the CDC on this issue. But I wonder if putting in a czar on this is kind of a way to pass the buck, to not take responsibility within the own administration in terms of how it's handling it. Tammy, what do you think?
Heather, let me remind everyone, John McCain, I think, was one of the first people to call for a czar, and he had been one that had been critical of Mr. Obama's tendency to appoint other people. We have people who are supposed to be czars in a national crisis. The President of the United States, the head of the CDC, we have the head of the HHS, we have the head of the DA. We have so many alphabet soups here. The fact that we don't have one of those people in the cabinet that to be able to convey a situation is troubling, and that's what's concerning the American people. We have conflicting information. We have action by the president that indicates that this is political for him, and I think that's only going to cause more problems when it comes to the perception of what's happening
There's been a lot of talk about a potential travel ban. I want to listen to this soundbite from President Obama. And Marianne, get your reaction on the other side.
I don't have a philosophical objection necessarily to a travel ban if that is the thing that is going to keep the American people safe. The problem is that in all the discussions I've had thus far with experts in the field, experts in infectious disease, is that a travel ban is less effective than the measures that we are currently instituting.
Marianne, he talks about experts there. I wonder if he's just trying to put this responsibility on someone else. Why not just state that that is his own opinion, he's the commander-in-chief, and leave it at that?
So this is what goes on in politics today. Everyone called for a czar. He appoints a czar. Then he gets criticized for appointing a czar. He gets criticized when he takes exception to some of the advice he gets from generals about Iraq and Afghanistan and other wars. And then he gets criticized.
Whether or not there should be one.
And it was clear the president said last night he was open to a czar, appointed one today. He has not yet been convinced by the experts that's the way to go. So he's actually trying to be thoughtful and deliberative here, get the information, and decide if that's the best way to do it. And that's what you'd want the president of the United States to do.
Tammy, just a couple seconds. Last word, please.
Yeah, we need real leadership here. Clearly, that's not exhibited. We have conflicting information. On one hand, we banned travel for our healthcare workers in Dallas, but we're allowing it for infected countries. Most of what they're saying isn't making sense, and they adjust themselves and change it themselves the next day. Yeah. So there's inconsistency, there's a lack of understanding, and that's President Obama. The buck should stop with him.
Tammy Bruce and Marianne Marsh, ladies, thanks, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.